Hi guys, Coach Joe Micela, Performance One Advanced Sports Training, 2012 Olympic team coach. Had a big question that was asked to us. Do we really need a national training center like many other countries have for the sport of Olympic weightlifting? Back in the day, going back to the early inception of Olympic weightlifting in America, we had a training center. The late, great Bob Hoffman, who started York Barbell, basically used the money from his factory in York, PA to fund his team, his club team of York Barbell, where these guys came and lived and stayed in York, Pennsylvania. He got them jobs, he got them housing, and they basically just trained full time. Plus, he was able to fund their international trips because he was also funding most of the Team USA's trips for that time period. Bob did that for a very long period of time, and then when he stepped down and when he passed on, it wasn't continued. Fast forward, we kind of went through the dark ages there in the 70s, even the 80s, where everyone was kind of like on their own. And it wasn't until into the early 90s where we had a formal training center at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs, where we had a full-time dedicated coach, and we recruited resident athletes that were based off of ranking in the country, that we were able to bring them to Colorado Springs and just dedicate their whole day to training. Back going into 2016 Olympics, right before that Olympics, we basically lost funding for having a resident program, and they discontinued the program. And another failure of USA Weightlifting was they never tried to continue that program privately on their own outside of the alliance with USOC. But the question is, do we need that to be successful at the national training center, or excuse me, at the national and international level with our top people? And my personal opinion is yes. You know, do we need a national training center? Yes. In my personal opinion, I think we need like 3 regional training centers, 3 to 5 regional training centers set up throughout the country. If you follow the model of most of the higher end international programs, is that they don't just have one center where the athletes train exclusively. Usually they have multiple, and they'll spend time periods at each. Well, they would go anywhere between 4 weeks to 8 weeks at a given period at a particular location. And then they would change. They would either again go back home, rest up for a week or so, and then go to another training camp, or go from training camp to training camp for a period of, again, a 3 to 6 month period of time. And they use that different location strategy just for variety and that newness to make sure the athletes don't get stale. I think one of the deficiencies with our training center that we've had over the years in Colorado Springs was, and again, I can't say this about every athlete, across the board is what we saw is that some kids, some athletes, when they got there, they're like, I've made it to the highest level, and they just kind of plateaued. Okay, again, not everybody, but some. And then that constant push wasn't always there. You know, now they had other people in the room, but it wasn't always there. They got a little bit kind of complacent. And some of our best athletes, where they were now even from changing locations to doing international camps, would have brought upon that excitement, that energy, that drive for them to want to do better. Okay, and I'm a personal believer of that. Or also just changing out who was there, holding more of that proverbial carrot over the heads of the athletes, saying like, hey man, if you don't do this, 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 and this, by the end of the month, like you could be gone. You know, it wasn't like that. In the past, the athletes had a 6-month window of time that they could be there and show performance gains. So some athletes would just kind of like chill out for 5 months and kind of put forth kind of a little bit of effort, and then just show a little bit of improvement at that 6-month mark, usually at the American Open final, and then again at the Nationals. And they were then okay for another 6 months. And they just kind of did that because, you know, and that wasn't great. Now, I'm not saying that about every athlete. Some athletes, they busted their ass and they continue to make progress because they had bigger and bigger goals. But they were the exceptions. You know, and on the whole, we were losing a lot of money up there because we weren't pushing our athletes mentally and physically hard enough. And I believe that bringing in different athletes to push those kids that were up there could have been more beneficial. What happened fast forward towards the end of the training center's career is they kind of took that idea of bringing in other athletes to push people, and they started offering training specials to everyone who ever touched the barbell. And they spent an exorbitant amount of their budget on bringing in every athlete for months at a time or weeks at a time, flying them up and paying for all these costs, and most of those athletes didn't pan out. And the problem with that is they didn't have a good system to identify those athletes that should have been in there in the first place. And I think they would have been better off not bringing in all those athletes and taking the athletes that they had and actually shipping their butts to Colombia, shipping their butts to Ecuador, shipping their butts to Russia, shipping their butts to another country in Europe to train with those top people. Send our girls to Colombia. Why? Because their girls are awesome. Send the girls to Mexico because they were really good. Sending our guys to a country that was somewhat comparable to us or slightly better to push our guys. And doesn't hurt to be in slightly meager conditions too. Colorado Springs was like a lap of luxury. They had the best equipment. They had beautiful training environment. They had good food, good sleeping situations. Well, go train in Cuba for 2 months. Let's go see how that works out, where you have minimal and meager conditions. But you know what? The guys are busting their ass and they're kicking our ass, so maybe learn from that grittiness. That budget would have been better spent doing something like that. And I'm not saying you're taking 20 people down there. It could have been 3. It could have been 5 and a coach. You could take 3 or 4 of our top girls to, like I said, Colombia or Ecuador, or even Mexico. Mexico's women's team was really good. I think that would have been a situation, again, sparking that desire, okay? Personally in our gym, we've incorporated over the last year and a half, an open training day where we invited other teams, other clubs in the state to come in for a heavy day. And that energy in the room was awesome. A lot of PRs were actually had and made that day when most people were like, I only thought I was going to go up to 85, 90%. Next thing you know, the person's attempting and hitting a PR because it was the energy of the room. Now, can that be sustained every day? Maybe not, but it could be sustained over a period of 3 to 4 weeks. You're in a new environment. You're bringing somebody in. You're like, hey, this is my territory. This is my gym, my country. I don't know this foreigner coming in here and kicking my ass and showing me up in my own gym, which they're trying to do. So that raises your level of competition, especially if it's someone in your weight class. So I think we lacked that where guys and girls were just going kind of through the motions. Now, they did try to bring in other teams over the years that would come in maybe for a week, here or there, but never super sustained, where it was long, like 3-4 weeks periods of time. It was a training special here, training special there, and we never went there for an extended period of time. We were bringing all these youth and junior kids in. I just felt like it was a waste. I remember being a part of a couple of those camps. I remember turning to the national coach at the time and said, this is bullshit, okay? We're wasting our time with all these people. There's no talent identification of these kids. There's no data collection of these kids. There's no review of who these kids are, who their coach is, what now is a plan for progress and for future development. How I would have done it, let's talk about that. How I would have done it when I was a part of many of these camps, I would say, we're going to test everybody. We're going to do extensive interviews on who their coach is and their background, that coach's background and this kid's background. I want to know everything about the kid. I want to know about his mom, his dad. I want to know about their athletic career. I want to know if he's the run of the family or he's like Johnny All-American. Does he play other sports? Is he a loner? Is he extroverted? I want to know all those things because I'm going to develop a profile of this kid. Then I'm going to bring him into our camp. Okay, I'm going to bring in the top 10 to 12 kids in the nation in the ages between 15 and 18, and I'm going to make them train. But first, we're going to have a day or two where we're going to collectively go over all the exercises that I expect them to know and how to do them correctly. I'm going to give them a little book of all the terminology of how to do those exercises, which again, I would turn around and give it to their personal coach. Because the problem we've had in the past too is that we bring these kids into camp, we beat the shit out of these kids for a week to 2 weeks, and there's no communication to the coaching staff of what the kid needs to work on. And we send the kid back, and sometimes, in some cases, the kid's more confused. The coach may have said one thing or 2 things, and maybe the personal coach was already working on that, but because somebody at a national training center said something to the kid's confused, and he now overlooks at that national coach as having more information than his personal coach, and not every time that happens. There's a lot of national coaches we've had over the years that don't know as much as some of the local coaches or the personal coaches of those private athletes, but they think they do. And what happens is they've screwed up a lot of kids too. So that communication back to that personal coach says, hey, tell me everything about Johnny. Well, Johnny does this, and this really good. Johnny does this, he's working on this. Oh, okay, you know what? I confer that you are right, that he does need to work on this, and this. What are you doing for that? Well, I'm doing this. You know what? That's a really good plan. Maybe add this as a national coach. We feel Johnny, if he works on these things in 6 months, he could be snatching. He's currently snatching 100. He's currently clean and jerking 125. I think in 6 months, he has the ability, because of all the things that we're testing him on, size, explosiveness, reaction, work capacity, his eagerness to compete and train. We think he could do a 115 and a 145 in 6 months just by correcting a couple little technical things. Okay, let's check back in 3 months to see if he's on plan. Let's communicate that. And then we go at 6 months, Did he make those goals? Did he make those marks? No, why not? Well, he got the flu for 3 weeks. You know what? He super exceeded those goals, or he did hit those goals. Then there's confirmation on the national level that we have keep track of this kid, and he's a kid that we can see is going to feed into our program down the road, or he's not, okay? And then we have to reevaluate what went wrong with our predictions of Johnny. Well, you know, we knew that the way his body was built, that he is susceptible to chronic tendonitis in his knees. And we know that even though he is a hard worker and he's strong and he's this, he's that, but the way anthropometrically he's built, when we've seen this in the past with kids built like that, they have a higher propensity to have severe tendonitis in their knees to the point that it can be debilitating. Okay, well, what should we do to that? We really like this kid and think there's a future, or do we just throw him out in the trash and say, we can't worry about this kid? Well, let's try to work. Let's have a PT and ortho on staff or as a part of an advisory committee and say, hey, we see this before. What would be your recommendations? We think this kid has potential. We get their information, put it into this database, into this file, and go back to his personal coach because we can't be with him and say, hey man, we're suggesting this. You can do it or you don't have to do it, but if you do this, this is gonna help you in your future career. He does it, next thing you know, Johnny's a national team member. He doesn't do it, he starts getting into drugs, he starts getting alcohol, we lose Johnny. But we did our part as the understanding that. And then keeping track on, just like at the NFL combines, who did we hit on and who did we miss on? You could have the kid do everything right from your measurable standpoint, but the kid's fucking nuts, okay? The kid gets involved with the wrong people. He gets involved, you know, within a relationship that fucks him up. Whatever the case may be, we may not be able to control that unless we see it like, hey man, this person is toxic and you don't need to be with this person. Then you can give him a suggestion or point him in the direction of help. But a standpoint of weightlifting, we go, hey, this kid has those measurables that we're looking for. What are the measurables we're looking for as a national team? In my 24 years of being around the sport, our national coaches don't have a friggin' idea. They haven't. They just go, oh, well, we got lucky with this one. You know, this one fell in our lap, you know, and then maybe they've worked with that person and made them better. But a lot of it, there was no systematic organization down to the grassroots level of what we should be looking for. How should we be cultivating that talent? And then we do get that talent up into the junior ranks or the youth ranks. And then they come to our camp. I was at a camp where we spent a whole day doing performance testing on vertical, running tests, broad jumps, throwing medicine balls, doing some other anthropometric measurements. I was like, man, this is great. I was the one collecting all the data. And I remember going like, all right, we're gonna have a coaches meeting, we're gonna go over this, and we're gonna learn from our national coach what to do with all this information. He's like, no, we're not doing anything with this information. I said, why not? He says, we don't have time. He says, we gotta go on to the next day. And I said, what the fuck did we just spend the whole fucking day doing all this shit for if we're not going to use it and go over it? You know, we had a kid that had like the highest vertical in the camp. He was the most unassuming kid. He was like a 62-ish, in between 62 and 69 kilo lifter. He was out of Georgia. I don't want to mention his name. Kid had like the highest vertical jump. He was the most unassuming kid. And he cleaned 150 kilos in that competition. He was screaming explosive, fast twitch muscle fibers. He was a goofy looking kid. You never would have expected he was that explosive. I was like, guys, like, we got to talk to his coach. We have to cultivate this kid from an understanding of better technique, because his technique was a little wonky. He was unbelievably explosive, which we want naturally. We need to talk to him about nutrition, what he should be eating now, and how we can get the most out of this kid. He was only like 17 or 18 years old. We're going to go like, you know, this kid could be a stud down the road if he's given the right, if we even just showed that we gave a shit to the kid and we showed that. Another one again is now understanding who has the mindset for weightlifting. We lose more talented, physical talented specimens because they don't have that want. They don't have that burning desire to be successful. One year at a youth and junior camp, I was brought in and I went around and again, I work with a lot of female athletes, so I kind of was gravitating more to the female side of the room. And I remember going up and I asked like 10 of our top girls, and on paper, the 10 top girls that were on paper coming into that camp, that either had previous experience winning national youth or junior titles or making an international youth or junior team, whether it be the Pan Am or junior world team. And I went around and I was just like, I said, such and such, who's the best in here? Oh, I don't know. You know, there's a lot of good girls in here. Okay. Go up to another girl. Hey, who's the best in here? You know, who's the best girl out of all the girls? I don't know. You know, such and such is really good. And I don't know, we're all really good. And I was going around the room and every girl other than two. I went up to this one girl and I go, who's the baddest bitch in this room? And she looked me dead in the eye. She's like, me. I said, you? I said, why you? There's a lot of tough girls in here. That girl won nationals. That girl's junior world team. And she was like, 'cause I want it. She's like, I want it more. I was like, holy shit. I want that girl. I want that girl. We had one other girl that said the same thing. She was like me. She's like, I squash all these other girls. And I was like, fucking A, yeah. I was like, that's the girl that I want. I want those two girls. I don't want the girl that's undecided. It's not that she's trying to be humble. She's giving grace to everybody else. She's happy to be here. Fuck that shit. I want that girl or guy to have that. Now, I want to cultivate that ego in the right way so they're not like some narcissistic asshole. But at the same time, I want that attitude, that burning chip on their shoulder that I have something to prove to everybody. That they're constantly not satisfied with what's going on. Again, not to the point that it makes them psychotic and they're not satisfied with success of any kind, but they know that the job is not done and I know that I'm going to put that work in and I want to beat them. You know, I have to find on a daily a reason and a motivation that is pushing me to be better. And sometimes that is the littlest competition, a competition on one particular thing that day that I need to compete on. Something else on another day. I have to find that motivation that I want to be better. Because if I go into the day being too lethargic and subpar is okay for that day, then that turns into a second day. That can turn into a third day. That can turn into, I'm okay with, I'll tip my hat to you. You beat me today. Again, I'm not saying that they have to lose sleep over it, but they have to learn how to have a switch. That it's all fun and games. We're kumbaya when we're eating lunch and we're warming up, and then it's like, boom. Now I'm competing. Now I'm out for your throat. Okay? I want to push myself to the point where everyone in that room knows who the best person is. There's funny stories about some of Olympic champions and world champions when they would walk into a training hall that they just carried a presence amongst them, about them, that other athletes just knew it, And sometimes they won just by their presence alone. And it was that confidence. When you're lifting heavy, you're hitting your mark. Okay, you just have this confidence about you that when you lift, okay, and you're in the room, then people are then trying to chase you. But you also knowing that I'm being chased and I want to stay ahead. Okay, and I want that. I want that athlete to push themselves. Because again, it's going to be a grind. There's going to be long periods of time when the training between competition to competition is just long, hard training sessions. And they got to find that motivation. I feel that we never did that from a psychological standpoint at our training centers. I think a lot of times it was like this person was over there, this person was over there, this person was over there, to the point where people got so comfortable and with their platforms that they literally had their own platforms. To the point where if I was a national coach, I said, change. Whoa, all the heavyweights have always trained on the platform in the corner. I don't give a shit. Move the frig over here, okay? You're too comfortable, too comfortable. Oh, well, I always stare at the same thing on the wall. That's why I picked this spot and I've been here for 3 years. I don't give a shit. Move. I normally train alone. Tough shit. You're now training with your teammate who's right there with you. And you're going right after they go. You have to change that up. You get too comfortable, it kills progress, okay? And I think our training centers never did that. How do we now go fast forward? We don't have a training center. So what do we do about that? Well, that's where, finding the right financial partner, finding somebody that can put something like together. We've been fortunate in different programs throughout the country, and even I had this at one point in my gym where we had people that we were being successful, we were producing at a very high level, and then people started moving here. We had an athlete move from Mexico. We had an athlete move from Michigan. We had an athlete move from California. We had athletes that started gravitating to what we were building in Arizona for quite a period of time. For about a 5-6 year run, we were having people that were moving here, finding little part-time jobs just so they can train. Just so they can train and be a part of what we were building. And it lasted for a very long period of time. Now, it couldn't be sustained for a variety of different reasons, but if we had better financing and funding, we probably could have did that. Muscle Driver was a company back in the day that tried to do the same thing. Cal Strength tried to do the same thing in California. There was a club called American Weightlifting tried to do that. They turned into Podium Gold. They tried to do that in California too. A couple people have tried to do that. And it works on smaller levels if they're local already, but it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of financing for people to stay there and do that. We're trying to do that again. If we could get that back, I think if USA Weightlifting really cared, they would try to fund at least a couple little different regional training centers. It could be done. Basically little gyms that basically cater to a regional training center. You open it up to the public, be a regular weightlifting center. It may even be a combination that's a weightlifting center, CrossFit, strength and conditioning, sports performance center. And the proceeds from that, if they operate it as a nonprofit or even as a for-profit business, make it though that as a regional training center that athletes in that area could go to. Whether they work there, whether they're training there, and then they're being supported from that community. And the funds from that community support their travel, support even their living expenses. And as a nonprofit, and you're just paying the staff to be there, you're paying for the lights to be on, but any extra and above and beyond, aside from having a little, nest egg for a rainy day fund, is going back into the program. And I think it could be sustained. Am I the guy to start it? No. Okay. But, there also could be people that, again, philanthropic people that could be a part of something like that. And we have 3 or 4 of those. We get more involved in the college programs. The NAIA involved more where they can have regional training centers. One of the big things that has helped push college wrestling is huge. Not only that college wrestling, at one point college wrestling was being killed left and right because of Title IX. They were removing college programs. Then there was a resurgence. A lot of it had to do with women's wrestling, but also they started developing what we call RTC, regional training centers, that were in conjunction with a lot of college programs. Colleges helped support it, and then they brought in outside money to help bring in post-collegiate athletes to come and train there. We need to find something similar to that with weightlifting. Finding colleges, smaller colleges that would be willing to partner with us in this regional training center concept. Whether it be provide housing, whether it be providing them as student athletes, whether it be providing just the facility alone that they could come into, and then we could support that. And then there's some type of national program, or regional program where these athletes are now being monitored and tracked with that filing system that I had talked about, and then educated, supported, and then brought along into this pipeline system of you're going to get better. We're developing a long-term athletic development plan for you. You are 18 now. We're looking at you hitting these kind of numbers by the way you're 20, by 22, and then hopefully by the years of between 24 and 27 is your peak years, and that's when we're really going to make you rock and roll. Okay? It could come sooner, and if it doesn't come at certain points, we're not completely throwing you at the trash, but you just may not be the right person for this program. You may have to step out, okay? But we're going to find those type of people. And that's what they're looking for. I do believe the training center's concept can work. I just think it was just handled completely wrong. I actually think it would take a private center that was funded correctly and not an OTC, an Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs to really flourish. I said the problem with that is we had too many people dictating the direction of how that center should have went. And let's be honest, they were all wrong, okay? They were all wrong for the last almost 8 to 10 years. I'm not saying the people that are necessarily coaching there were all wrong, but the general concept of how the center was handled was wrong. Because if it was right, it would have produced more, and it didn't. So again, it was too complacent. It wasn't pushed the right way. It wasn't supported the right way. We tried to do something at Northern Michigan University. As soon as it lost a lot of the funding, boom, the program went dead. Okay? Was the concept great? The general concept was great, but the execution of how that program was going to be sustained wasn't. I think having, like I said, a private facility that is open to the public, that can help foster, and people knowing that this community center is also going to help support these people in their journey to become national and Olympic athletes, I think would gain more attention. It can be done. I think it just has to take the right amount of understanding of the business side of it, but also to how they're all going to connect and formulate. Guys, we'd love to hear from you. Please like our channel. Please subscribe to anything that we are, our different formats of programming from YouTube to Instagram, and submit us questions. We'd love to hear from you about what we're doing. Take care. Have a good day.